What if one of the most ordinary-looking coins sitting in your pocket, coin jar, drawer, or old collection deserves a second look? At first glance, they may look almost identical. Same familiar Roosevelt portrait. Same denomination. Similar size and design. But collectors know something important. A coin's date alone doesn't tell the whole story. The mint that produced it, the condition it's in, the quality of its strike, unusual characteristics, and especially possible errors or varieties can completely change its collector interest. And there's another fascinating detail about this group. These coins come from a period when American coinage was going through significant changes. So before you spend one of these dimes, let's examine them carefully. Because sometimes, the difference between an ordinary coin and an interesting collectible isn't obvious at first glance. Let's start with 1967. When you're collecting Roosevelt dimes, small details matter. The 1967 dime continues the copper-nickel era that began during the mid-1960s. But when you examine a coin like this, don't immediately jump to a price. First, identify exactly what you're looking at. Start with the date. Then inspect Roosevelt's portrait. Look at the hair, cheek, and other high points. If the coin has significant circulation wear, those details may become soft and less defined. Next, turn the coin over. Study the reverse design. Look at the torch in the center and the surrounding olive and oak branches. Then examine the lettering. Are the letters clear? Are there areas where the strike appears weak? Are there unusual shapes or marks? This is where coin collecting becomes more like detective work. You are comparing what you see against what a normal example should look like. And remember, condition is extremely important. Two coins from exactly the same year can have very different collector appeal if one has been heavily circulated while another has been carefully preserved. A coin with bright surfaces and strong details can attract more attention than a heavily worn example. But there's another factor you should never overlook. Damage. A coin may have scratches from being carried in pockets for decades. It may have been cleaned. It may have suffered environmental damage. And these things can affect collector desirability. So don't polish your old coins simply because you think shining them will increase their value. In many cases, improper cleaning can actually hurt their numismatic appeal. The 1967 Roosevelt Dime is therefore another coin worth examining carefully. Don't ask only, "How old is it?" Ask, "What condition is it in? What characteristics does it have? And is there anything unusual about it?" Those questions can lead you much further. And now we're heading into the 1970s. Our next dime is the 1972 Roosevelt Dime. The 1965 Roosevelt Dime is an especially interesting place to begin because it belongs to a major transition period in American coinage. Look closely at the date. 1965. This was the first year Roosevelt dimes were struck in the new copper-nickel composition following the removal of silver from regular U.S. dimes. That makes this date historically important. And this is exactly why you should never judge an old coin simply by looking at its face value. The 1965 dime doesn't necessarily become valuable just because it's from 1965. In fact, many examples are common. But collectors don't look at just one factor. They examine the condition, strike quality, surfaces, and unusual characteristics. So if you have a 1965 dime, take a moment to inspect Roosevelt's portrait. Look around the lettering. Look carefully at the date. Then examine the reverse. You want to see whether the details are sharp or heavily worn. Also pay attention to the edges. A normal Roosevelt dime has a distinctive reeded edge. If something about the edge appears unusual, that's a reason to investigate further. And here's an important warning for anyone making coin collecting videos. Don't assume that every unusual-looking coin is automatically rare. Coins can become damaged after leaving the mint. A scratch, dent, discoloration, or strange appearance doesn't necessarily mean you have a mint error. Authentic mint errors and varieties require careful examination. That's what makes coin collecting so fascinating. You aren't simply looking at an old piece of metal. You're looking for evidence. The 1965 Roosevelt Dime therefore deserves a careful inspection, not because every example is extremely valuable, but because this date represents an important chapter in American coinage history. And now we're moving 1 year further into this new era. Our next coin is the 1972 Roosevelt Dime. Now we arrive at the 1972 Roosevelt Dime. By this point, the copper-nickel era of the Roosevelt Dime was well established. But that doesn't mean you should ignore a 1972 example. In fact, every coin deserves the same basic examination. Start with the date. 1972. Now look closely at the entire coin. Don't just stare at the portrait. Rotate it under good lighting. Examine the fields, the flatter areas around the design. Look for excessive scratches, unusual marks, discoloration, or anything that appears different from a normal coin. Then examine the reverse. Pay special attention to the torch and lettering. If you're searching through a large group of coins, consistency is your friend. Compare one 1972 dime with another. Do they look exactly the same? Are there differences in the shape of letters? Is the strike stronger on one coin? Does one have noticeably different surfaces? This comparison process is one of the easiest ways for a beginner to start learning about varieties and errors, and if you believe you've discovered something unusual, don't immediately announce that you found a rare fortune. Take photographs. Use magnification. Compare it with reliable references. And, if the potential value is significant, consider professional authentication. That's especially important because online videos and social media can sometimes make ordinary damage look like a spectacular mint error. The 1972 Roosevelt Dime is a perfect example of why careful research matters. It may look like an ordinary 10-cent coin, but the collector's job isn't simply to look at the denomination. The collector asks, what exactly is this coin? How well was it preserved? Was it struck normally? Does it show a recognized variety or mint error? And finally, what does the market actually say about examples like this? Those are the questions that separate casual searching from serious coin collecting. And we're only halfway through. We're going to examine the 1973 and 1984 Roosevelt Dimes, and then I'll show you exactly what you should check before deciding whether any of these coins deserve a place in your collection. We've already examined the 1965, 1967, and 1972 Roosevelt Dimes. Now we have two more coins, 1973 and 1984. And remember, we're not simply searching for a big price tag. We're searching for interesting characteristics, condition, varieties, errors, and historical significance. Let's continue. Our fourth coin is the 1973 Roosevelt Dime. Take a close look at the date. 1973. This dime comes from a period when Roosevelt dimes were already firmly established in their copper-nickel era. But here's where your role as a collector becomes important. Don't look at the coin for only 5 seconds and decide whether it's valuable. Give it a proper examination. First, inspect the obverse. Look at Roosevelt's face and hair. Are the details sharp? Or have years of circulation softened them? Next, look at the fields. Are there lots of scratches? Are there unusual spots? Does the surface appear original? And then examine the reverse. Look closely at the torch. Look around the lettering. Look at the rim. And finally, look at the edge. This systematic approach is much better than simply searching the internet for 1973 dime worth money. Why? Because the year alone isn't enough. A coin's value can depend on its mint mark, condition, variety, error status, and overall demand among collectors. That's why you should always be careful with claims such as, every 1973 dime is worth thousands. That is simply not how the coin market works. Some examples are common. Others can be more interesting because of condition, varieties, errors, or other characteristics. And that's the real lesson of this coin. Don't spend your time searching for a magical date. Learn how to identify what makes a particular coin different. If you're searching through rolls of dimes, old collections, inherited coins, or pocket change, this habit can make your research much more productive. And now we're coming to our final coin, the 1984 Roosevelt Dime. Our final coin today is the 1984 Roosevelt Dime. Compared with the 1965 example we started with, this coin is nearly 2 decades newer. But don't make the mistake of thinking, it's newer so there's nothing interesting about it. That's not how collecting works. Even relatively modern coins can become collectible when they have unusual varieties, recognized mint errors, exceptional preservation, or other characteristics that collectors seek. So let's examine the 1984 dime. First, check the date. Then examine the portrait. Look at the highest points of the design. Now move toward the lettering. Inspect the spaces around the letters. Then turn the coin over. Look at the torch and the surrounding details. Finally, check the edge. If you find something unusual, don't immediately clean it. Don't scratch it. Don't try to fix it, and don't use chemicals to make it shine. Instead, preserve the coin exactly as you found it and investigate further. Take clear photographs. Compare it with verified examples. And if it appears to be a legitimate mint error or potentially valuable variety, professional authentication may be worthwhile. That's especially important because coin damage and mint errors can sometimes look surprisingly similar. For example, a coin that has been damaged by machinery, another object, or years of circulation may look unusual, but that doesn't automatically make it a mint error. The key is evidence. And that is the biggest lesson from our 5 Roosevelt dimes.